It's time to look at the Sacramento Kings and their 2019-20 NBA season. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com and at Yahoo Sports Australia. And you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is also brought to you by rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. We're looking at the Sacramento Kings. I'm recording this just before Game 1 of the NBA Finals, so I don't have any NBA Finals thoughts as yet. You'll see my thoughts on that on Twitter. I'll probably talk about it a little bit in tomorrow's show, but we're here to talk about the Kings, a team that did make it into the Orlando bubble, that didn't make it into the playoffs again, and I think were really disappointing after some promise from last season. The new coach, Luke Walton, got some questions on him. It was not ideal. So let's get to those questions that you guys send through. And just a quick reminder: tomorrow's show will be on the New Orleans Pelicans. So questions you have about them, you can throw them in the Instagram story when that goes up, or reply to the tweet that I throw out as well. Carl Svazvar, 15. Will Harry Giles ever be a starter in this league? Harry Giles, an unrestricted free agent. The Kings didn't pick up his option, which was a terrible decision. Giles played okay this season. Can he start for maybe a year, a half a year as an injury replacement? Yeah, sure. I don't think you want to look at Giles as a long-term building block as a starting center, but the dude's only 22. The worry, of course, you have with him are the knee injuries that cause his college season to be a write-off, his high school season, his first season in the NBA, and really just to limit him throughout his career. So I think he can be a solid enough backup, and he can be better than what he has been, but I wouldn't want to rely upon him to be a starter. W. Schumann Klein. Fox pushed 34 minutes a night with 23 and 8 with better 3-point percentage, or will Walton will Fox push toward 34 minutes a night, and 23 and 8, or will Walton keep him to low 30s? I don't really think that he'll be kept. Let's you get this, the pencil Harrison Barnes, he was at 35 minutes. Don't worry, I'll play the Barnes drop later on. So I don't think Walton is adverse to playing those big minutes. Fox also had a significant ankle sprain during the season, which I think kept some of those minutes down. I think he'll push up for future minutes next season. The 8 assists might be tough. Maybe he gets to 24 and 7.5. Though it's not outrageous to think that he gets to that number. Where else are we at here? Let's have a look. Next question. Do any of their free agents stay? Sorry for just smashing the microphone there. Okay, so we've got Bazemore, Lynn, Giles, Yogi Ferrell. They're all free agents. Do any of them stay? I think they'd like to bring back Kent Bazemore. I think there's a real chance that he stays. Giles, no chance. Ferrell, probably not. Alex Len, I would doubt it. And as for Bogdan Bogdanovic, almost certain to me that he stays. So I don't think there's too much problem with that one. Is Buddy getting traded from I Am Stepan? I would say, now it's really hard to say that trades are definitely going to happen. I think Buddy Hield is not going to, let's say Buddy Hield is not going to play out the life of this contract for the Sacramento Kings. He's got a contract extension. He will not play out the life of this contract. And I'd say it's 50-50 that he starts next year as a member of this team. He was whining and complaining before he got his extension. He was whining and complaining after he got his extension. There's just... And people might disagree with this. You're reading too much into it. Buddy is a great locker room guy. And I've had people who are in the Kings locker room tell me that, that's not true. Buddy loves being here. I'm telling you now, I'm not there. I'm not talking to him. But subtext is so important. And I think this happens often. I've gotten into debates with Matt George, the host of the Locked On Kings podcast, because he's there all the time and he has a real affinity for the team, loves the team. But sometimes that can whenever it's a 50-50 decision, you look towards the positive because it's a team that you love. For someone like Hield, I think that so much of what's coming out, maybe I'm reading it negatively, which is a possibility. that it just seems that he is just not happy. He got benched. The team wasn't happy with him. He wasn't happy with his extension. He wasn't happy with his lack of extension. He wasn't happy with his playing time. He wasn't happy with his role. He's not happy with his role now. He's liking posts from other teams. I really, he is not happy there. I don't think the Kings are all that happy with him. I don't think Buddy Hield's going to be around. It's a long string to get to, but that's where I think we're at with Bud. Will Bogdanovich get traded after they re-sign him? I'm pretty sure they won't. Look, at some point maybe, but I think he is part of what they're trying to build as a core. Is Ori Berlinski, would Bagley be worth the risk for a 6th round in a roto league? Like, absolutely not. The 6th round in a 12-team league is the top first 72 picks. Why would we risk a guy that A, can't stay healthy, B, isn't good, C, hasn't proven anything at that high? Could he be a top 50 player? Of course he could if they give him that opportunity. But he was the 3rd best big man on this team. 4th, if you count Harrison Barnes as a power forward. Like, he wasn't that good this year, and he barely played. He's coming into his 3rd season, but no way you go that high on Marvin Bagley. I wouldn't have thought. Shout out to my son, who was a smartass on Instagram and asked the question, who are the Sacramento Kings? Thank you, Ben, for that question. Is Fox worth the max? Probably not, but probably not far off. And I think that they have to pay him the max. So therefore, I guess by definition, someone offers you the max, you accept the max, you are a max player. Is he probably worth it? I think he's probably a little bit under, but he's definitely like a 23, 24 million guy, maybe not 26. But that's at that point, and I don't have $26 million to say this, but at that point, it's probably splitting hairs. This got to be taking the piss. Is Marvin Bagley a top 20 lock next season? Top 20 power forwards on the Kings? Sure, he's a lock for that. Let's have a look. Is it a stretch to say that Bagley is the 2nd best center on this team? I don't think so. There's absolutely zero argument that he was the 2nd best center on this team last year. Was he the 3rd best center on this team behind Alex Lynn or even Harry Giles? He was significantly worse than Richaun Holmes. Now, in the future, can he be better? Absolutely, but he was definitely worse during the season. All right. What we might do now is I might tell you about DoorDash, because DoorDash is the app that you need to get on your phone so that you can get food delivered directly to your door. Delicious food from local restaurants that need everybody's support, but you need support as well because you're working from home. You're dealing with kids learning from home. You're dealing with the stress of maybe not being allowed outside your house or not within 5 kilometers of your house. It can be a really stressful time, and we all still want beautiful, delicious food, and DoorDash can get that too. They've got over 300,000 partners in the US, Puerto Rico, Canada, and Australia. Local restaurants and national chain restaurants are all supported on DoorDash. DoorDash deliveries are also now contactless to keep communities that we operate in, or that they operate in, safe. Right now, our listeners can get $5 off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's $5 off and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget, the code is LOCKEDONNBA for $5 off your first order with DoorDash. All right, let's look at the old questions on Twitter that came through. Nurkic Circus says, this year Fox's points rose by 4, but his assists, steals, and blocks dropped slightly. He thinks Fox can get to 23 and back above 7 assists, similar to that question earlier. I think having a center he can lob dunks to and efficient wings from the arc will help get his assists up. Your advice to Walton? Well, Walton, honestly, is a poor coach. They need to push the pace. That is what Fox does best, and they just consistently slowed it down all season. I think I've shit on Bagley a lot. He wasn't worth the number 2 pick. He's not good. He's probably the 7th best player in that draft class at the time, and it was a bad decision to draft him there. But he still can be a useful pick and roll partner and lob threat for Fox, and I do agree that can help. Joe Buck says, do I have any takes on Daquan Jeffries? I'll talk about him a little bit later. Joe. Richie says, is playing Bagley and Holmes together a disaster, or can it really work? I think it's probably leaning more towards disaster, but that's not to say that it can't completely work. The problem of those two guys is neither of them can shoot. Bagley, theoretically, maybe could shoot, but in practice, he can't. So we're a long way off him being in that position to work as a 4. He can't defend as a 4 either, and he can't shoot. So that is That's the real problem there. Now, they really didn't play very much together at all. Only 24 minutes together Holmes and Bagley played over the course of the season, 54 possessions. That really isn't enough. And look, the net rating in that time was like a negative 11. But it's so small that we can't read anything into it. The problem I have with that is that when you look at, or you think about the players that they are and how they go together, those numbers actually make sense as to that it would actually be that bad. I just don't think that it's the idea. It's the ideal pairing, really. Spencer Lynn says, Bielitsa was a pleasant surprise this season, but with the front court healthy for now, do the Kings look to trade him? Maybe. I think they just like to have him around as a three-point shooting, serviceable big man. We can't trust Bagley to stay healthy. Multiple injuries last season, an injury-filled rookie season as well. We can't trust him to stay healthy. You can't also probably trust Richaun Holmes to stay healthy at this stage either, although the shoulder injury is probably going to be fine. I don't think they look to trade him just at this point. Nick says, as a Kings fan, will I ever experience joy from basketball, or should I pick up a new hobby for a couple of years? Let's get it straight, Nick. If you've lasted for the last 12 years or so, I think you can do a couple years more. Are they in line to be a championship contender in a couple of years? Probably not. But I think just stick with them. I think we'll see where we get from here. Is Walton officially the worst coach in the league now that Boylan is gone in Chicago? Probably. Yeah, he probably is. I think there's potential for Thibodeau to be in there. We'll see what he does with the Knicks. But I would say that's probably close for Walton to be the worst coach in the league. Matt Lawson, are you buying or selling these Kings Dynasty ADPs? Darren Fox at 28. That's pretty aggressive for Fox. It's not outrageous. Fox was the 56th ranked player this year because he struggles with his free throw percentage, a poor rebounder, and low volume three-point shooter. I am not certain that I would necessarily buy him at 28. Bagley at 75. Nah. Look, there's too much risk built into that. I don't think so. Hield at 76, I probably would buy. Holmes at 78, I probably would buy as well. Bogdanovich at 110, I'd buy every piece of that. I think that he can be multiple top 80 type player. Barnsley's at 170. No. Look, we've seen Harrison Barnes. He can't be a top 100 player at his best. He's not at his best. He's not in the best situation. No interest in that. Bielitsa at 185. I reckon you might get a couple of years where he beats that. You might not. I think that's on the borderline. Harry Giles at 188. People still having a lot of faith in Giles, and Jabari Parker at 240. Parker, we'll talk about him later. Actually, some really interesting numbers from Jabari this season. Absolute shithouse when he was playing, but the numbers were pretty good. I don't think, and he's still young. Both those guys are still young. I think I would buy into both of those guys just because they're young assets, and we'll see where they come from. And the PAST says, is Al Horford and pick 21 enough of a return for Buddy Hield? No, I don't believe that's the case. Why would the Kings want Al Horford to pair with Marvin Bagley and Richaun Holmes? The 21st pick means nothing. Horford is old. He's paid more money. It is 1 year less than Buddy Hield's extension. No, it's not even close to being enough, in my opinion. All right, let's get into talking about these Kings players now. We'll start, of course, with Darren Fox, who put up some okay numbers this year, but as I said, he probably wasn't. He was a little bit of a letdown at times, and a lot of that is the injury he had, where he had a grade 3 ankle sprain and came back pretty soon from that, earlier than I expected anyway. Fox played 32 minutes a night, averaged 21 and 7 with 4 assists, but it's that 3-pointers that's the issue there. Only 3.6 per game and only 1 made per game. He hit 29% and only 71 from the line. A true shooting of 56%. He was a positive in PIPM and a positive in Raptor. That's all well and good, but that 3-point volume is a concern. Now, he's obviously, to me, obviously to everybody, the best prospect on this team and is going to have the most fantasy value over the coming years. And he can get better than this. But like I said, when looking at those Dynasty ADPs, do I expect him to consistently beat rank 28? Yeah, probably not. What he did in comparison to last year, he scored those 4 more points, no doubt. But his assists dropped, his steals dropped, and that's not that much of a worry. The worry there is what happened with the threes. But I think we can at least look at it with some hope that he shot 37% from 3 last year. He was down to 29. Some of that is going to be the ankle problem, and some of that's going to be just variance. I don't think he's a 37% shooter. I think he's more of a 33, 34% shooter. If he can get to 5 attempts per game, hit 1.7 of them, I think that's okay. And that's where that value can rise. The worry you have there, then the steals dropped. They went from, per 36, they went from 1.9 to 1.6. It's a decent drop-off. The worry you have there is because he was doing more on offense, his usage went from 24 to 29. Is he not playing passing lanes as aggressively? Is he not as good defensively? This happens to so many players. And I think that when we look at those pass numbers, go, well, if he just gets these other numbers back up and his steals bounce back, I'm not sure that the steals necessarily bounce back. In fact, I reckon there's a chance, and we saw that a bit with Mike Conley during his career, that he had a couple of years where he was a 2 steals per game guy and then decided to come down. That Fox, maybe instead of going back to 1.6 or almost 2 per 36, he goes down to 1.2, 1.3. And then he has to make it up with more scoring, which I think he can do. But it obviously put a lot of stress on him with those poor free throws. Now, the good thing with his free throws is the attempts are up there. So if he becomes a good free throw shooter, no guarantee. In fact, unlikely that he ever does. Then the volume's there. But 72, 73, and now 71 in 3 seasons. At this point, we accept that he's a bad free throw shooter. And, well, he's bad for a guard. He's a below average guy. And in fantasy, that is going to have an impact on you. The next guy that we take a look at here is, of course, the aforementioned Richaun Holmes, who was the 58th ranked player this season, a massive surprise. Holmes has always been a good per-minute player. We know that. We've talked about that plenty of times. But finally, he got an opportunity when Bagley went down with Dwayne Dedmon absolutely sucking, and Holmes put up big numbers. He played only 28 minutes a night and averaged 12 and 8 with a steal and 1.3 blocks. So why was he so good in fantasy? Well, 79% from the line was great, but 65% from the field is where it is. So it's the blocks and it's the field goal percentage and it's strong rebound. So he's really a 3-category guy there. Steals were average, doesn't hit threes, points were low, assists were low, free throws were right on average as well. It's all about big field goal percentage, really good efficiency as we can see there, 68 true shooting. He was a massive impact guy, 1.7 PIPM, 1.1 Raptor. They're really, really strong numbers as well. But I am a little cautious as to what Holmes does now and to how the Kings use him. He's 27, so he's right in that peak area. So he probably got 2 years at this level. Do they play him? Do they just lean all in and go, well, Richaun Holmes is our center for the next 2 years now, and Bagley sits behind him. We try to play the next to him. I think given where they are, and they're not in a great position, that playing someone like Holmes over Bagley, probably for your future, it's not the right decision. Because development, you want, Bagley's 5.5 years younger. You'd want to give him those minutes, but he hasn't proven that he's good at them at this stage. I think there is a little bit of a worry that Holmes doesn't push into the 32 minutes a night sort of area, and he sits at 26 and drops his numbers off. And if that field goal percentage falls away, that is a concern. And the other thing we've got to look at with Holmes is that he was a 61% shooter last year, 56 the year before, and his free throw percentage went from 73 to 79. All right, if that falls back off, then the value just disappears completely. His per 36 rank was impressive, again, 76. He was 65th the year before that. But that's because his block rate was through the roof and he went back to normal. But it's the worry there of how that efficiency translates across. I think Holmes is a good player, obviously. He's a really impactful guy, and he was the Kings' best player for majority of last season, even better than Darren Fox. But I'm not sure that it's a long-term prospect to believe that he is going to be that good or he's going to continue to improve in big, big leaps and bounds. That's my worry with Richaun Holmes. I haven't touched on it yet, but I probably should. They have the 12th pick in the draft in my latest mock, and I am going to do version 5 of this mock after I get through all these team reviews, and it's definitely changing because I've already changed my top of the draft board, and I'm going to make some pretty aggressive changes up there. But in my last mock draft, I had Cole Anthony at number 12 to the Kings. I think they lose Yogi Ferrell, who's a third-string point guard. I think they probably trade Buddy Hield. I think that they probably should minimize what Corey Joseph does. And Cole Anthony, while I don't think he's ever going to be a high-level starter, he can be a Corey Joseph-type player who can play 22 minutes, who could potentially play next to Fox at times as well. I think that would be the one they look for. And I'm not massively worried about Anthony's poor college play. Some of that, or a lot of that, was system dependent. So I do think that he is worth a look for them at pick 12. The next guy we look at is Budrick Hield, who was the 61st ranked fantasy player this year. His PIPM and Raptor were negatives, negative 1.1 PIPM, negative 0.7 Raptor. He still shot 57% true shooting, 27 usage, but he did get benched at the end of the year. And he played 28 games coming off the bench. And the stark difference here, in his 44 games as a starter, 34 minutes a night. In his 28 games off the bench, 25 minutes. That is the real worry. In the bubble, he played 21 minutes a night only. He was the 122nd ranked bubble player, 14 points per game. Now, I talk about this a lot, is that free throw shooting and shooting in particular can be a confidence thing. He shot 60% from the line and just 42% overall, hitting 14 points with not much else. And the problem with Hield is he scores and he hits threes and he doesn't do anything else. He doesn't get assists, he doesn't get rebounds. He had one season of getting some pretty good steal numbers, but that has fallen off. And even that was only up to 1.1. Every other year, he's been below 1 steal per game. He doesn't block shots. And we saw his true shooting fall from 59 down to under 57 this year. But his usage did spike. His usage went up to 27. But he's still, that's a big drop off from what Hield did. And if he remains on this Kings team, he won't beat that number of being ranked 61st. They really limited what he did. Fox and Bogdanovich is the options they went for. They played Corey Joseph there as well instead of Hield. He is completely out of favor with this team. Now, if he goes to another team, will he have a better run at things? Potentially. I think that he will come into another team and get confidence back. I think the shooting is fine, but we have to remember he is an extremely flawed player from a fantasy perspective in that he scores and he needs volume to do that, and he hits threes and he doesn't do too much else. That's really what he does. And we know that three-pointers are the most replaceable number off the waiver wire. Now, getting three-pointers at, say, 47% field goal percentage is not an easy thing to do, and that's what Hield can provide. But he offers nothing else. I think he is a significantly overrated guy, and a guy that fantasy ranks do overrate quite a bit as well. His advanced stats projections aren't particularly good. In fact, I don't really like him as a long-term prospect. And by long-term, like the dude is already 28. He's almost 28. So we're talking about, he can be a role player shooter, but that's sort of what he is now. So how much more improvement is there in here? And I think the answer to that is not very much at all. Let's talk about Bjelica, who is old, 32 years of age for Nemanja. He was a real surprise this year. 85th ranked player, really positive PIPM plus 1.11, 1.7 Raptor, 60 true shooting and on low usage. He averaged 12 points in 28 minutes. The value he provided was just being literally average everywhere. 2 threes per game, average. 6 rebounds, average. 3 assists, a little bit below average. 0.8 steals, a little bit below average. 0.6 blocks, a little bit below average. 48% from the field, absolute average. 82% from the line, marginally above average. Everything he did was just average. And that is a perfect rotisserie player, an okay head-to-head guy, but not a great one. And then you look at how this team's going to go, what they do with Bagley, you feel that Bjelica's value is going to drop off. Now, in the bubble, he played just 24 minutes a night. He still somehow was the 57th ranked bubble player. Why? Because he blocked a shot a game and he shot 55% from the field and 82% from the line. Probably not going to be a 55% shooter. He's super useful as a three-point guy. We know that. And he's going to be that player that has hot and cold streaks. I would highly doubt that he is a draft target in the top 110 next season. And then, of course, his long-term value at the age of 32, 33, heading into the season after, it's not going to be very high. He can be an impactful guy, but defensively, he struggles. That spacing is important for this team, but I wouldn't expect him to top what he did for this last season. Next up is Bogdan Bogdanovic. He was the 90th ranked player. That's why I looked at that ADP, that Dynasty ADP at 110. I thought that's ridiculous. Now, he's not that young. He's 28. He's the same age as Buddy Hield. He's a year older than Richaun Holmes. He's not super young. He played just 29 minutes a game, 15, 3, and 3 with 3 triples, a steal, 44 and 74. Like, not particularly good numbers. Good volumes of threes, but what I was impressed with Bogdanovic is his bubble play. We got more minutes from him because he and Fox are the pairing they want. He averaged 20 and 4.5 with 5 assists and 1.3 steals and shot 47 and 91, including 44% from 3 and over, or almost 3.5 triples. A lot there is unsustainable. Probably that 47% from the field and 44 from the line is unsustainable. Everything else is okay for me for Bogdanovic. So if I had to say, will he be outside the top 100 or inside the top 50? I'd rather take the inside the top 50 bet for Bogdanovic next season. I really like him as a player. You know that. He was a positive PIPM and Raptor again. I've been saying for years he's a better player than Buddy Hield. It looked like it might be a little bit rough last season, but in the end, that prediction came out being true. We talk about his age, though. That is somewhat of a problem as to where he lies in the future. And maybe this or next season, maybe next season, 2021, is the best season he ever has. I think that's a legitimate possibility. He's a restricted free agent. The Kings will bring him back. He should be getting 16, 17 million a year would be my guess. That's what I'd be paying him. He can handle the ball. He can play defense. He can shoot. He can score. He can do a lot of different things. But he's probably got a 2 to 3 year window of being a very good fantasy player, given his age. I think he can still be a useful, maybe it's only a 2 year window, to be honest. He's got he can be a solid role player after that, but this is the time for Bogdanovich to make some noise. Next up is Jabari Parker, who, on a per-game basis, was the 91st ranked player. Ridiculous. Unbelievable that he was that high. Negative 0.8 PIPM, negative 0.1 Raptor, 57 true shooting, 24 usage. So why is he bad? He played 38 games because when John Collins was injured in Atlanta, that's where he did his damage. He started, and even before Collins came back, Lloyd Pierce said, you know what? I think this guy's actually trash. And I think Lloyd Pierce is probably right. He was able to go out there and put up big numbers, good scoring numbers, good rebounding numbers. But that is so much a product of being in the right place at the right time. And the fact that he couldn't maintain 30 plus minutes until Collins returned is a massive red flag. He came across to Sacramento and he just didn't play. We know he had the issue where he saw that weird COVID breach in terms of him playing tennis. He just didn't play. He came across in that Dwayne Dedmon trade. He played 6 games and 13 minutes a night for the Kings. 5 of those 6 games were in the bubble where there was no Marvin Bagley, and he averaged 9 points in 13 minutes. He shot the ball well again, 67% finishing. That's what he can do. He can be a decent volume scorer, but he gives up so much on the other end. He lacks defensively. He lacks with passing. He's not a good three-point shooter. He can really blind people by putting up points and rebounds at times, especially points, and your power dunks and all that stuff is great. I just don't believe that Jabari Parker is an impact player. He has a $6.5 million player option. He wouldn't get that on the open market. He should pick that up, but there's no guarantee he's even part of this rotation. But in saying all of that, the dude's only 25. 2 ACLs have been a problem for him. It's really limited some of his mobility. But there's just too many holes in his game for me to get excited about where he ends up or what he can start to develop into. I think we've seen where Jabari Parker is as a player. Let's talk Bagley now. The 156th ranked player, negative 2 PIPM, negative 4 Raptor, 51 true shooting. They're all shit numbers, terrible numbers. He played just 26 minutes a night and only 13 games with those foot problems. He still averaged, and again, raw numbers, he averaged 14 and 8. That's pretty good. But 0.3 triples, 0.8 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.9 blocks. They're all really rough. And these were the concerning things for him coming out of Duke in college. Can he shoot threes? Will he pass at all? Will he play any defense? To give him credit, I worried about where he'd be as a free throw shooter. 81% last year. It is such a small sample size, though, so I'm not ready to say that that's solved. The true shooting at 51 is a concern, considering he was at 80% from the line. It just meant that those other numbers weren't great. He's got a long way to go. Where he fits on this team, again, remains to be seen. But he, like Parker, he's young. He's much younger than Parker. He's 4 years younger. He's 21. He's not going to turn 22 for a few months now. So there is some hope that things can get better for Marvin Bagley. I know that he'll be better than this. I know that he can be a player that comes in and puts up really good scoring numbers and good rebound numbers, and he can probably block 1.5 shots a game. Maybe he's a 50 and 80 guy from the line. And that actually forms the basis of a pretty good fantasy player. The problem with that is that will his lack of threes, his lack of passing, his lack of defense, his non-fit in the modern game mean that he doesn't actually play the minutes to get to those numbers. And that's sort of, outside of injuries, where it's been for him in his career so far. I don't think he's a good fit in the modern NBA. I don't think he's someone you want to build around at all, but I am really confident he's going to be better than he is. And I think he will have some top 70 fantasy seasons at some point in his career on the back of being a 20-9 player with 1.5 blocks and maybe 1-3 a game. I think he can get to that for a season or two. Is he a long-term winning prospect as a player? That I'm not sure about. And I think we're still 4 years away from really getting to the best of where Bagley can get to. Maybe it's even further away than that. But obviously he is not worth the selection at number 2. It was a terrible pick at the time. It looks worse now, and that's putting a lot of pressure on the kid. But that's the reality of where he was picked, and maybe it is going to be better for him to be out of Sacramento at some stage to enable him to get away from you were the guy that we picked instead of Luka Doncic. I think it's a real issue for him, and it's unfair at times, but that's where the fan base is going to go a lot of this stage. Let's talk about Harrison Barnes, the pencil. Barnesy. Barnesy was the 162nd ranked player this last season. Negative 1.21 PIPM, negative 1.4 Raptor, a 57% true shooting. One thing I'll say for Barnes is he took that step back usage-wise, and he should have. He played 35 minutes and averaged 14 and 5, 1.5 threes, 0.6 steals, 0.2 blocks. This is what Harrison Barnes does. Literally nothing above average. Not a good shooter, a low three-point guy, a low usage, a low rebounder, a low assist, a poor defensive stats guy. He's been that guy throughout his career, but he's been able to maintain a semblance of low-end fantasy value by just maintaining a high usage. And now on this team with Fox, with Holmes, with Hield, with Bogdanovich, with Bagley, all these higher usage players around, he's just not in that role. So he's never going to get these numbers again. I would be staggered if he ever cracked the top 100. I'd be pretty staggered, to be honest, if he ever cracked the top 120 again. Barnes is, let's get his age. He's 28, so he's still not that old, but I really don't see it all improving all that much for Barnesy. As we move forward, to me, he's almost a fantasy non-entity at this stage in his career. I think he's better suited as a 4. The Kings played him a lot as a 3. That happens when you got Holmes and Bagley around, and then they played Holmes and Bjelica there. I'd love to... Look, they did it a bit more in the bubble and played him at the 4, which is absolutely his best position in my opinion. But the way their roster's constructed, the way the coach run things, it doesn't always go that way. But even if he plays the 3 or he plays the 4, it's not going to make his fantasy value really become good, because I think we're a long way away from that. Next up is Kent Bazemore, who was terrible earlier in the season for Portland. Really, really bad. Came across to Sacramento and played pretty well. But that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be good moving forward. His Raptor and PIPM were basically right on zero. 197th ranked player, but a true shooting of under 50 is really where the problem is there for Bazemore. 38% overall shooting, 34% from 3. He averaged a steal per game. He hit a 3 per game. He got those 25 minutes a night. In the bubble, he played 21 minutes again, averaged 10, 4, and 2, and was a really useful player. But still, the shooting was rough. He can't finish 2-pointers anymore, just 39% from 2 in the bubble, which is a struggle of a number. I think the Kings would like to bring him back. I think he'd probably like to be back in Sacramento, where he was a really solid piece, and minutes would open up for him if Buddy Hield was traded, and depending on who would come back in that situation. But Bazemore, I thought, was able to at least resurrect his career. But this dude's 31 as well, so he's really just a rotation bit part player for the rest of his career. Alex Len, the 220th ranked player, he had an opportunity in Atlanta to be a useful player because he was their starting center for big chunks of this season. He didn't really succeed. 8 and 6. His 3-point shooting from the year prior, where he had a 40% run over the last 3 months of the year, fell off. He only shot 27% here. Averaged 8 and 6 with a block on 56 and 65%. He had moments where he would start in Sacramento when Holmes was injured, but realistically, he just didn't do too much. He only played 13 minutes a night in the bubble as well. And yeah, his advanced stuff is fine. It's nothing spectacular. It's nothing terrible. But Alex Len is just a serviceable backup center who, if you have to push him to a starter, it's not a bad decision, but it's not a great one. And he's an unrestricted free agent. I think you'll find a contract somewhere, but I wouldn't bank on him really ever being a top 150 player again in the NBA. Corey Joseph, one of the worst fantasy players on a per-minute basis, the 239th ranked player, was a negative 0.11 PIPM and negative 0.4 Raptor, 52 true shooting. I think he's significantly overrated defensively. They started playing him a ton of minutes in the bubble, 28 minutes a night for 6 points. He was the 147th ranked bubble player. He did average 4 assists, which is better than what he normally does, and he didn't miss a free throw, but the shooting overall was pretty poor. He just isn't a good fantasy player. He's not someone who puts up really good per-minute numbers at all. And a guy that is, 29 years of age. Not huge levels of future upside for Joseph. I think they would love for someone to come in and replace him, but at this point, he's going to come into next season as the backup point guard on the Kings, and doing very, very little from a fantasy point of view. Next up, Harry Giles, 272nd ranked player. His advanced stuff was bad, actually. Negative 1.4 Raptor, negative 1.4 PIPM, negative 5.6 Raptor, 58 true shooting, and the Kings didn't pick up that rookie option, so he's an unrestricted free agent. He averaged 7 and 4. Showed some passing flashes, but some of that passing that we've thought could really develop hasn't gotten to the level that we thought it might. 0.4 blocks, 0.5 steals. 55 and 78 is really good in terms of efficiency, but he can't shoot threes. He won't shoot threes. And yeah, I think we're still a few years away from getting him to his best. But as I said earlier, is Harry Giles a starting center in an NBA team? Only by way of situation versus planning for him to be that guy. I just don't. I know he's still young, he's still 22, but I think the knee injuries have robbed him of a lot of athleticism, and he just isn't that guy that you want to trust to be in that position. I think he'll be on a different team next year. Maybe that reinvigorates him, but I'm not super interested in him long term. Yogi Ferrell, 411th ranked player. He had a little run early in his career with Dallas, but now he's what he is, a third string point guard, 27 years of age. If he's not in the NBA next year, I wouldn't be surprised as an unrestricted free agent. The advanced stuff is okay, plus 0.2 Raptor, 53 true shooting's not great. It's just hard for him to hold up defensively. He's not a good playmaker, and the shooting really waned down to 30% from three for Yogi Ferrell. Daquan Jeffries, 424th ranked player. Didn't play a huge amount in the NBA, just 13 games, 11 minutes, averaged 4 points. His G League numbers are okay. 17 points. He averaged 7 rebounds with a steal. He shot 34% from 3 on almost 7 attempts per game. I thought defensively he put up some okay numbers. He shot good true shooting at 60%. Not bad numbers from Jeffries. A plus PIPM in the G League, but nothing spectacular. Some of the projection stuff likes him going forward. I think that he finished 424th here. He's a restricted free agent coming up as a two-way guy. I think that he should find a regular roster spot as a wing-sized player who is 6'5", can shoot a little bit, can handle it a little bit, can rebound, can play a little bit of defense. There's enough there for him to be a rotation player on a team, whether it's this team or another. Out of the three G League-y type players, they've got Jeffries, James, and Guy. I like Daquan the most out of that group. Let's talk about those other guys now. Justin James, I didn't like the draft pick at the time. I still don't like Justin James necessarily as a player. He's 24 years of age, or turning 24. He averaged 2 points per game. He played most of his time in the G League, where he averaged 16 points per game. He shot 75% from 3, but only played 3 games in the G League. So realistically, he just didn't play at all. He did have some injuries during the year. So it is hard to get overly excited or overly critical of Justin James. A 0.43 G League PIPM is alright, a negative 0.35 in the NBA. You want him to develop into being a shooter. Maybe he gets there, but I don't know what else he really brings to his game. The last guy we talk about here is Kyle Guy. Another two-way guy, one of the worst players in the NBA in terms of fantasy. 517th ranked player, 3 minutes a game, 1 point per game. Like he just didn't play. We just didn't see him. But in the G League, he was really good. 21 points per game, almost 5 assists, 40% from 3 on almost 10 attempts per game. He averaged a steal a game. I thought he was pretty good in his G League stuff. The advanced projection stuff actually really likes Kyle Guy. I still would have Jeffries ahead of him. But Guy is a player that can play some point guard, play some off guard. And if that shooting volume is real, maybe he can step up and be that third string point guard that Yogi Ferrell was. Maybe he can step up and be a replacement for Corey Joseph in the future. Guy is 23 as well, so not a young player. But a guy that at least that level of shooting, that level of production in the G League, plus some of the advanced projection stuff, all tells you that maybe this guy can be a good player. So that at least should keep him on your radar as someone. Look, out of those three, I still have Jeffries, and then Guy is a close second, and then James is a long way back. But a player that I reckon can, and look, don't look at his Raptor as negative 19.4 and go, shit, that's terrible. He played 9 minutes in the NBA. So these numbers are all impossible to judge. We look at what he did in the G League. We look at some of the projection stuff coming out of college. We look at it and say, I think there is a little bit of value in him, that he can be at least a positive level player for the Kings, and that might mean his best season is a top 200 season. I think that is a real chance that he can get to that level. that'll do it for me for the Sacramento Kings. Again, I'll be back tomorrow talking about the New Orleans Pelicans, so throw those questions at me. Subscribe also, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it. I'm out everywhere, guys. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.